Hi everyone, so I'm going to show you um, the safeguarding awareness for online delivery, so how it's been adapted from face-to-face online, how we change some of the activities, the information, how the slides look, etc. So hopefully you would have seen Tammy's video first, but if you haven't seen that video, stop now, go back and watch it so you can see how it is delivered face-to-face, how the activities are carried out, and what we're expecting to get from those activities, and then come back and watch this one and you can see how we've changed it for online delivery, how we've adapted things, brought in things like Slido, etc., and how it all looks for that online adaptation. So the first thing I'm going to show you actually isn't the online delivery, it's a copy of the join instructions that the delegates get prior to attending the session. There's quite a lot of information on there that actually helps with that adaptation that we've made. It helps with that online delivery to make it a lot more smoother. It allows the delegates to be aware of any of the technical platforms that they need to use, anything they need to download prior, and some information for them as well, especially around some of those activities. So if we go through this email then that you can see, it's a copy of one that was sent out previously. So you can see that actually attached is a guide for Zoom, there's a guide for Slido, there's a zip folder that has activities in it. So like I said, when we go through some of the activities that we've made adaptations for, the delegates need worksheets, so they need copies of scenarios that we may be speaking about, etc., so that they get these prior to the session. They can download them, have them uploaded on their screen, on another screen, or print them off if they're able to, and so they can still carry out those activities as required, and then also their workbook that is delivered alongside the training as well for them to complete. So you can see they get aware, they get told the safeguarding training, what it's called here, the date, the time, that they can access through join via the link here, but also they do have the meeting ID and password if needed. So as we scroll down, this is where then some more of that information that helps out for the online delivery. So they are informed of who their facilitator is. Obviously, it was me in this instance. They have my email address, so they can email me if they're having any technical issues. They can email me if they can't access the documents, if they have any problems around timing, if obviously they can't attend, etc. as well. So I always have, and you can see obviously we've got there to join the session at 9:45. Now, hopefully you saw one of the key learning instructions from Tammy around delivering online training is actually to be prepared. And a lot of that preparation is done prior to delivering the session and on the day. And I actually joined Zoom and launched the training session probably about 9:15, so that I've got plenty. One, I can check my own tech, I can check that everything's going on and it's working, everything's downloaded, it's all ready to go, my microphone, my camera, etc. But then we ask for delegates to join early as well. And what we actually do within this time is as they join, we let them in one at a time. We can then go through any tech issues with them. Does their camera work? Is their microphone working? Were they able to download the Slido application? We can go through any questions that they have. Were they able to download all the activity sheets and workbook? If not, we can quickly send them via the chat room to them. And then we create a breakout room and put them in that breakout room. We tell them it's up to them if they want to have their video and microphone on. We let them know that obviously delegates will be joining that breakout room as they come in, and we go through the process for each one. They can go and grab a cup of coffee, they can have their video off, or they can have their video on and chat away and network, etc. that way. So actually that preparation really starts there as well, even before delivering our sessions, to help with any of those technical issues that might arise. But also I have my laptop next to me. I deliver on my main computer. I have my laptop next to me. I have my emails open. So if anyone does email and says the link's not working, I can't get in, that I can also then deal with that without having to close Zoom and get back into my emails, or kind of minimize it and risk anything happening that way as well. So you can see they also get all the times, so our start times, the lunch that includes the activity, break times, return and finishing. So obviously then if they obviously are at home, some people may be at work in the office, so they can make sure that they do have a lunch break. If anyone's at home and they've got little ones or they need to make calls, etc., they can then try and plan those calls to happen during the break, or they know then that they can do lunch for themselves and their children and partner as well. And then there's just some instructions for them to do so prior to the session, to obviously download Zoom, read the guide, so they know how to participate, they know of the functions, if they can practice if they want to, and the same for Slido. And it also tells them then to kind of familiarise themselves with the activities and to download the workbook, etc. And that the workbook is there for them to complete during and after the session, that there's an activity for them to do in their lunchtime. And we also say that we will be watching videos, but obviously then we know sometimes these aren't broadcast very well throughout Zoom, depending on the connection and how many people may be in the room, etc., and the bandwidth. So we do give them a link of all those videos. They can watch them if they want to prior. We have said there is no requirement for them to do that, but they can also access those links, so they can watch it on another device if it's very quiet, or it's jumping, or if it's not buffering very well for them, or they've also got access to watch it again afterwards if they want to. We do put in a note about cameras, so for this course particularly, but for all of our courses, this one is a CPD accredited course, so we do ask actually to have full participation and to be able to actually assess them, that they need to have their cameras on for at least 95% of the session. We do welcome virtual backgrounds. Again, we do say that the facilitator can help with them, so really does help if they log on early. We can go through all of that prep work with them. But then obviously it does help very much around kind of engaging. We can see everybody, we can ask them questions, we can still kind of feed and read their body language, their facial expressions, etc., and make sure that they are actually paying attention. Obviously we do have a bit on there, if they've got any technical difficulties, then we need authorization, and then how they can engage in other ways as well. We do put in a note that we know that obviously some of them may be delivering online, may be attending, from home, so that we do know, obviously, they might have little ones. We understand that when people may be knocking on the door, phone calls, etc. as well, and to advise use headphones if possible, because we will be talking about the categories of abuse. It's a very emotive subject, and that hopefully then obviously using the headphones will stop anyone around them, especially younger ears, hearing things around abuse that they probably don't want them to hear. Then there is a link for the feedback for the evaluation form, but we also include that in the training session as well. And then obviously just a note of there that we ask them to join so that we can help with any technical issues that are going through. So as you can see, they're same as from Tammy's, that we still actually have that music embedded in the presentation. So as people are joining the session, getting settled, coming back out from their breakout room, that is playing, so it is in the background. So it is there for people to listen to as we're coming through. So you can see that there is a big difference in how it looks as well. So we did update the training presentations just the normal look of this as well. It does help for online, so it does make it a lot more clearer, makes it a lot brighter. You know, it's not that dim. So we know some people may be attending on their iPads or their phones, might be slightly smaller screen. But actually, to make it a lot more clearer and brighter does really help with that adaptation as well. You have to excuse some of the little fonts. It does look a little bit different because I'm having to do this on my MacBook at the moment, and obviously normally I would deliver on my main computer. So, but all of the actual content and the activities is exactly the same. So the first thing through, as you can see, is we've changed the ground rules and the health check and Zoom. So it's not all in one place. There's not a lot of boxes. Through the ground rules, we can ask for them to suggest anything around confidentiality, being punctual with breaks, obviously around things of, you know, sharing stories, engaging, all of those kind of things. Health check as well, as we kind of talk about, obviously it being an emotive subject to look after themselves. The joy with online training is actually everyone has control of their videos and their microphones. If things get a little bit too much, they can pause that for 5 minutes, they can step away, they can have a breather, they can have a break. And obviously Zoom also does have that private chat function. So we do let them know all of those options, that they can send us a private message. And obviously we can create them breakout rooms and have that private talk with them if they need to have a bit of a debrief as well. And also for health check, I always talk about physically looking after yourselves as well. We recognise that obviously sitting in front of Zoom for a long period of time isn't that great. Obviously you might need to stretch your legs, stretch your back out, etc. And so we also do say, you know, make sure that you can look after yourself that way. If you need to pause your camera for 5 minutes while you do get up, walk around, stretch your legs, that's not a problem, as long as you can still hear us while we're delivering that training, and it's only for a short brief moment of time, then again, that's fine. And then we talk about Zoom. So we bring in some of those ground rules around Zoom of, again, making sure everyone has their videos on, that we ask for microphones to be muted unless they are interacting and engaging, just to stop with feedback, and try and stop any of that talking over each other that Zoom sometimes has. And also we talk around that we are recording, and we bring in that kind of consent around that and chatting around that as well. And also kind of we talk around that health check. We do say about accelerated learning, you know, if you've got pen and paper, if you are doodling, if that helps you learn better, if you've got any of those kind of fidget toys, stress toys around you, all of that kind of stuff. Now's your chance to go and quickly grab it, and obviously then we can make a start. So then we talk around kind of what we're going to explore. So we talk around some of those aspects. Again, we mentioned the workbook and homework, that obviously we know that it might be quite hard if they haven't been able to print it and download it to make notes. The homework would then be to fill out that workbook afterwards, and then they can get signed off that way as well. Then we have our first main activity, which is around introductions, and you can see there it says that when they hear their name, to unmute their microphone and tell about themselves. Within 30 seconds, we do it as a time limit. One, because then that stops people from talking for a really, really long time and people getting zoomed out straight away. Two, we can have sometimes quite a few members in the group and large numbers, so it helps, obviously then it doesn't take a really long time. This activity really helps the delegates get to learn those functions of muting and unmuting, listening for their name, unmuting themselves, and dealing with any of those kind of issues as well. It also then whittles out any of those other tech issues. Sometimes we get, oh, I can't hear you, I can't hear anybody else, and it gives us that time to kind of sort those out through the private chat function while everyone else is introducing themselves. And through this, we also ask, we have a copy of the attendance list. What I tend to do is make notes on that of when people talk about the team and service users that they work with, notes on their job roles, the service that they work in, because that may help with breakout rooms to mix that up a little bit. And obviously, we sometimes have some things to ask around consent with GDPR, and we just ask if we can tick those boxes as well. So we can do all of that within this activity. And like I said, it really is a good introduction activity to get them to learn how to mute and unmute their mics and control that through that way as well. Then we talk around kind of why we're here. So again, we link it into the legislation and update a bit like Tammy was saying, why we do safeguarding, why it's so important, especially as, you know, as a new worker, if it's a refresher, why we update it, why we make sure we refresh every few years, etc. And we talk about then how safeguarding is everybody's responsibility and linking it to that as well. So then this is where we link it into the organisation's vision, mission and values. So depending on the organisation, we have this slide. We ask if anyone is aware of the vision, mission and values. Do they know any of those common themes? Do they know of the actual phrases, etc.? We ask for delegates to raise their hand so we can see them. We say their name and let them unmute themselves and then share those examples. So we have that group discussion and bring those words in as well. And then the next slide after this is then sometimes an actual copy of that organisation's vision. And again, so then we can link that. Why does that link to safeguarding? Really setting the tone of why we're here today. Then we talk about the national context. So the lesson plan of this has all of the stats and the figures and the information, but again, we're condensing it so it's all on just one slide. There's not loads of reams and reams of stats and everything to talk about. Again, we ask delegates, is there anything that they're shocked about? Is there any abuse that they're seeing recently in the media quite a lot? All of those kind of things. So again, we can have that discussion with them. Then we have an activity around definitions and it's a quiz. So you could see through on Tammy's one that we kind of either read out the definition to them, ask them what term they think we're talking about, or there's a worksheet, etc. through that way. So with this, we have actually brought in Slido. So we have the definition, so rather a question. The question is the definition, and then there are different terms that they can choose from that they think is related to that definition that way. So as you can see, it's done as a quiz. It comes up like this. The great thing with Slido is that you can change the colours as well, so it links in with the presentation. And if I just quickly flick through, so you can see that we've done these questions. So as you can see there, the question there is the definition, and then they can choose how this looks on through their phones, their applications that they're using. They can then choose the answer, and then it would tell us then how many is chosen. And a good thing with obviously then the correct answer. And a good thing with Slido as well is that you can put in a leaderboard, so it does then add a little bit of that competitiveness. So we would go through all of these, all of the questions, etc. And then we would actually talk about those definitions as well, because some of them do have double meanings. They do have a couple of extra definitions. Was there anyone shocked? Was there any confused on certain ones? So again, we can have that activity where we're bringing in Slido. It's a little bit different. They don't have to worry. We can't have to do it as a quiz, because if we're asking a question and then because of a little bit of delay, not everyone maybe get the opportunity to answer at the right time, etc. So it makes it a little bit more fair. It makes it fun. And then at the end, we can talk about those definitions and still have that group discussion as we would normally. Just go through these. And then we go on to the legislation, very similar to what Tammy was saying. And again, we talk about the legislation here. We ask them, how does it relate to their role? Have they had to use that legislation before? So it's very much us having those conversations, but we are asking those questions, asking for feedback, asking what they know about these acts as well, so we can still kind of have that discussion with them. Then we go on to the categories of abuse. So we use the same diagram here. And what we do is we then put them into breakout rooms. This is the first time the delegates this course would have experienced breakout rooms. We put them in breakout rooms relating to the categories of abuse within the pink and the yellow/green at the bottom there. And what we do is we ask delegates to have that conversation, and what we want them to do is think actually what that act is. So that act of abuse and the different acts that it can be. So we're not looking for the signs and symptoms at the moment. We're thinking around what those different acts are. So how these have presented, what could they actually be? So obviously physical abuse could be kicking, punching, kicking, pinching, and all of those kind of things. We do say, if possible, nominate someone to feedback, and then as we go through the slides, that person then can feedback some of those discussions that they've had. We ask them obviously to relate it to their roles. What have they seen? What have some of the incidents that have come through with their service users? How is it kind of presented? How have those acts presented? So is it that they've seen bruises? Is it that they're seeing isolation, etc., and those things? So they're in breakout rooms for a while. They're having those discussions. Obviously, we can pop in. So like Tammy was saying, of a facilitator wandering around the room, having those discussions, you know, popping our heads over their shoulders and joining in, we can still pop it into the breakout rooms. In breakout rooms, there's a button that they can ask for help as well. But we can pop in, help with any questions, check that conversations are still on point, etc. that way as well. And then as they come back, we go through, and then we get them to what were those kind of things, each group for each category, what were those things that they were having those discussions about. So it would just be the heading, and then as they are talking about these, I would bring them up as a visual for everyone else, and then obviously cover anything that hasn't been mentioned, or ask the other groups, has there been other things that maybe you've experienced as well that hasn't been mentioned as of yet. And we just go through each one for that. And then again, we have this discussion, who is the offender, ask that, and a lot of people will just go, well, it's everybody, or it can be anybody. And again, we can have those discussions again around bringing in some of those aspects that we've spoken about previously, you know, around values and those unconscious biases and those stereotypes and stigma, and how it can link into what we're seeing, how we may categorize abuse, how we may see those signs and symptoms, and then how it may look for our service users as well. Again, we go through kind of all those different categories, asking that group to share their information and have those discussions that way. Then it is break time, but we do say before we have break that there is an activity for them to do during their break. Now, part of the activities in that zip folder that I showed you at the beginning are worksheets that look like bingo sheets. In the middle is, the middle square is one of the categories of abuse previously spoken about. And what we ask them to do is spend a few minutes of their break thinking of all the different signs and symptoms that they think could indicate that worksheet's category of abuse. So obviously in the middle it may say sexual, and think about all the different signs and symptoms that this may present in their service users, and ones that they've seen through, that they've worked with, that they've supported with, etc. Ask them to fill out as many as they can. They can't repeat them, the categories. Try and get them to think out of the box, and say that then basically when they come back, we will treat it as a game of bingo. So we'll ask someone then to feed back, and people can tick it off their sheet as well. So again, to bring in the kind of that interaction, so they're not doing everything in breakout rooms, they're doing something on their own, they're thinking on their feet. We tell them to literally go for their gut instinct, just spend a few minutes, fill them out as quickly as you can, and then also to then know that you're going to feedback as we come back. Then we have our break here, and then the song does play again as well, and we can put tell them that again they can have control of their videos, their microphones. We can set up breakout rooms so they can have those network and those discussions as well throughout the break times. So then when they come back, we'll ask someone to start. So someone with their bingo sheet kind of start talking about those signs and symptoms that they wrote down for the category of abuse that is on the slide. I will start kind of putting these up in a list for as they are being mentioned, or right at the end. What we ask the other delegates to do is tick them off, and then kind of raise the hand if they've got a full line, if they've got a full house, etc. So very much bringing it into that bingo game, again, that interaction, that fun activity. And then obviously everyone can kind of clap and give a round of applause if you've got a full house, or if you've got a full line. And then also if someone, delegate that has volunteered, then we can say, is there anyone else that's got something that has been mentioned? So we can actually kind of get quite a comprehensive list of signs and symptoms. And again, we do this for all the different categories. So for physical, then we do talk around kind of the bruising and those areas of concerns. And then we carry on for sexual and obviously neglect, financial. Then another activity is to discuss those blue categories of abuse at the top there. So again, they go back into breakout rooms, and they are to consider the following. You can see what they know about it, the rationale, what other types of abuse may be displayed. So linking it into those categories of abuse that we've spoken about. So then hopefully they can link in those signs and symptoms, and that obviously they can see that their category of abuse they have been given is quite complex and does kind of bring in a lot of those categories previously spoken. Again, we ask someone to, if they want to, they can nominate someone for the group through that feedback. And again, then as that group is feeding back, then we have this on the slide as a visual. So as they're giving us this information, this is a slide for visual for everyone else to read along with, have a look, and we can obviously then pick up some of those things that may have not been mentioned. And we look around indicators as well. And then, so we do this for each one. Again, we have that video, so we can bring in that emotional learning, as Tammy said. And we just continue through for each of those categories, making sure that, you know, talking about that, kind of talking about the relevance, especially of self-neglect at the moment. We talk about the relevance it is to the service users, and especially obviously because of the impact that COVID's having. So we do have those discussions as well. So though it's that one group feeding back, we ask for that interaction and that engagement from the other groups as well. You know, is it presenting quite a lot more in your service? Are you seeing it? How are you seeing it? Has there been a change over the last few months, etc. as well? And also might say, well, have you ever, to that group, have you ever supported someone, especially kind of like around modern slavery and things? And they might say, no, we haven't. But then we could ask the other delegates, was there anyone else around in the room or the screen supported anyone around modern slavery, etc. that way as well, to again bring in those discussions, those sharing those stories and facilitating that learning within kind of the room as well. Then, like Tammy said, obviously domestic violence and abuse is a bit more in depth in this course because it is part of the level 1 as well for the organisation. So again, we go through that, asking the group to feedback first. We talk about some of the prevalence as well. So all again, kind of some of those stats, but again, we do very much ask them, you know, is this increasing your service? Have you seen an increase? Why do you think it may be increasing? Is it because of obviously the current situation? Is it because there may be something else going on? All of those kind of things as well. So then we'd ask around for indicators, again, from that group that we can talk about. And then we have a couple of videos that we can show them around, especially male victims of domestic abuse and the stigma and the stereotypes there. So again, that emotional learning, and have those conversations around, you know, has anyone supported a male victim of domestic abuse? Why do you think they don't come forward, and etc. And then obviously we carry on those discussions as well. Then we have a poll of just yes or no. Should we only look for indicators of abuse in adults at risk in children? So bringing in that question. Again, it's kind of, if we ask that question, it's a little bit of stopping that, waiting for someone to respond. It's kind of allowing them to answer quite, can't say the word, anonymously, so that they don't have to worry about anyone else kind of going, oh, why are they saying that, etc. So we can have that quick discussion, that quick poll, and then we can go onto this slide and talk about why we shouldn't, you know, have that answer that no, and obviously look through that way as well, through those group discussions. Then again, it's us kind of sharing some more of that information, so around parent-carer vulnerabilities, and also the impact of multiple problems. But again, kind of asking those questions. Has anyone worked with this before? Has anyone experienced it in their service? And some of those indicators as well. We talk briefly around some of those national themes, if they haven't been mentioned. And then we do go into those scenarios. So part of that email is that actually they're listed, they are given a copy of each scenario. So they are able to access that scenario previously. And then we put them into 3 groups, and then we say, right, group 1, we'd like you to look at scenario 1, group 2, scenario 2, group 3, scenario 3. Have those discussions. What are people concerned about? Is there any differences? You know, again, very much still bringing in those values, still bringing in those kind of discussions that Tammy was saying, but they're doing it in a breakout room in their private little groups. And then again, we ask them to feed back. While they're feeding back, we have the scenario on the screen for the other group to see. And again, we can bring in, once that group has fed back, you know, was there any discussions? Was there any disagreements? What were you concerned about? What are you not that concerned about? Did any of the other delegates in your group make you go, oh yeah, I didn't think about that? Then obviously, like I said, this is on the screen for the other groups to say, and then we can also bring in any kind of extra from them. Is that, now that you've read this and heard this, is there anything else that you would want to add? Is there anything else that you think's been missed, etc.? And we do that for each of those scenarios there. We then obviously then start giving some more of those information again around those roles and responsibilities, linking it into the organisation, their expectations of them. So again, that conversation, what do you think these mean? And have that conversation with them and linking it into their roles, the values, linking it back to the values and mission as well, and obviously overall safeguarding that they do every day to day. We talk about kind of who within their policies, who they should contact in that instance around any safeguarding concerns, obviously what to do if they notice any abuse or neglect, where they can go for further information. So we very much do link it into their making sure that they do read their organisational guidance. We talk about their policies, etc. Then we have evaluation. So there is, like I said, there is that SurveyMonkey link, but we have access to that as well as a facilitator. We drop it in the chat box. We ask everyone to click on that to complete make sure it loads to start completing the survey. We do this we haven't ended the session yet, but we do this to obviously make sure then we get as much of that feedback and those evaluations completed as possible. So we give them a couple of times to do this. There's also actually a facilitator feedback that we complete as well. So we do this at the same time. Sometimes we might play a little go back. Once I've known everyone's clicked, I'll go back to one of the break slides where it plays the music. So that's playing in the background for everybody because we're all quite quiet typing away, etc. Then once everyone's done that, we finish off the last few slides, which is very much around emotional resilience, looking after ourselves, that empathetic work, making sure that we talk around our emotional resilience as well. We talk about burnout, how we can look after ourselves, importance looking after our colleagues, supervision. We really hone in that bottom line there, that obviously if it's the best that you can do, then that's within the constraints of your role, then that is all that you can do. And actually that can be a bit of a learning curve. I always say it took me a while to learn that. Then we talk about obviously all the different ways that we can look after ourselves, really honing in on debrief, supervision, reflection on impact, recognise your limitations, bringing it to professional boundaries, which again we can link into that activity that we did first on around those definitions as well. And then also, depending on time, something I like to do is talk about relax, and I do ask everyone around on the screen just 1 or 2 things that they do to relax, to switch off at the end of the day. Again, sometimes I'll just give them like those little 30 seconds, because it's nice to have a bit of kind of a debrief at the end of the day, especially around safeguarding. What is it you do to relax? Maybe we can learn different things from each other, techniques and all those kind of things as well. But then we can also link that into, you know, these are your techniques, and if maybe you're not using them, that's a way that we can reflect on that impact as well. We do a recap of what we have explored, making sure that everyone kind of agrees to this, as the main learnings that people have heard, ask for some kind of examples, what some of the one thing you'll take away from today, so that we can just make sure that we have hit those objectives and those learnings. And again, also any questions. We talk around the next steps there, around obviously alerter and responder for frontline staff and managers, and how often we do refreshing. And then obviously we thank them for attending today, and that they can contact us on there. And then for online training, what I always say is that I am here until everyone's face has disappeared off my screen. So if anyone does want to ask me any questions privately, then obviously they can do. And then obviously, because I'll just wait until everyone's gone, and then I end the session that way. So hopefully you can see how we have adapted it. We bring in some of that movement, we bring in music still, we've got that emotional learning, we change those activities, we adapt it, but we can still make it really engaging, really value led as well, and bring in all those elements for training for influence.